Chapter 8. When Gabe walked into Elizabeth's room to find the boyfriend with whom she had apparently just broken up, his heart went to his throat. When he heard that her parents had called the man, he wasn't happy, but perhaps they were doing what they thought was best. After all, if she remembered an old boyfriend, she might remember a new one. The more her memory was jogged, the more likely it was to return. But when David described Elizabeth's relationship with her parents, when he said they hadn't attended her high school or her college graduation, he became angry with himself. Again he remembered the conversation where he had confronted her about not telling him who she was until after he had learnt the truth. "I never dreamed they'd show up." "What the hell, Elizabeth? You were graduating from med school. You were the freaking valedictorian, for the love of God." "You don't understand." "No, I don't." "Gabe, please listen. My family isn't like yours." He hadn't listened. He could never have imagined there was any doubt about her parents being there. When they arrived shortly after David, things got tense quickly. Her mother carried a bag from the hotel boutique. "David, it's lovely to see you." Dr. Quinn shook his hand. "Yes, it has been a while, but it's very good of you to come. I'm sure Elizabeth appreciates it." "I'm happy to help Elizabeth in any way I can." Neither of her parents greeted Gabe. Her mother sat on the edge of the bed. "Darling, I brought you some lounging pajamas, slippers, and a robe, so you don't have to wear a hospital gown. Gentlemen, if you'll give us a moment of privacy, I'll help her change." "I'll change later, Mother," said Elizabeth. "Don't be silly, darling. You'll be much more comfortable in these. They're cashmere, and you've always called me Mom, not Mother." Gabe had a hard time schooling his expression. Cashmere pajamas? For Pete's sake, who buys pajamas that need to be dry-cleaned? Dr. Quinn leveled a glare at him. Gabe simply motioned to the door. "After you, sir." They were barely through the door and had it closed when Dr. Quinn rounded on Gabe. "What the hell is your endgame, young man? Are you after her money? Are you hoping to convince her to marry you while she's in a fugue? Perhaps pay off your student loan debt before she remembers anything?" Gabe became angry instantly. He summoned every ounce of self-control he contained and said, "No, sir. I have no end game. I care about Elizabeth and want what's best for her." "Then why are you manipulating her to stay here?" "Manipulating her? Me? Are you serious? I assumed she would want to go with you and was as shocked as you were when she said she wanted to stay here." "Well, you made no attempt to convince her to do what's best and go to Baltimore with us." "But that would be manipulating her. She's the one who wants to stay here. I haven't pushed her one way or the other. It was you who came in last night threatening to have her declared incompetent if she didn't do what you wanted her to do. I was the one that comforted the sobbing, shattered girl you left without so much as a sleep well. Why don't you just leave her the hell alone?" David stepped in. "Dr. Quinn, this is not necessary. We all want the same thing. What's best for Elizabeth, do you agree?" "Of course." "Then let's let this play out. You requested a psych consult, did you not? Didn't you tell me the chief of the department will be seeing her this morning?" The chief of the department? Christ almighty. Her father certainly played to win. "Yes," snapped Dr. Quinn. Turning to Gabe again, he said, "And you can just clear off now, Soldani." David shook his head. "As far as I can tell, Gabe has only been supportive. I know they were friends in the past because she's talked about him before. In fact, I have always been under the impression that they were very good friends. I absolutely believe she remembers him, and what's more, she seems to take comfort from his presence. When she doesn't recognize anyone else, why would you deny her that?" "Because he has to be angry at someone, and I am the easiest target." "Fine. But I swear to you, Soldani, if I find out you were the one pulling her strings, I will destroy you." Elizabeth's mother opened the door. "James, you need to keep your voice down. You're upsetting Elizabeth." Dr. Quinn cast one more quelling stare at Gabe before striding into the room past his wife. David and Gabe followed. Elizabeth sat in her bed, looking tense but very pretty in spite of her injuries. Pale pink cashmere pajamas might be impractical, but they looked cozy and soft, as did the delicate silk robe. The cream-colored cable-knit slippers by the bed looked suspiciously like cashmere too. When her gaze caught his, the fear and vulnerability Gabe saw there caused his heart to ache for her. She reached a hand out to him. He took a step toward her, and Dr. Quinn grabbed his shoulder. "Elizabeth, Dr. Gerald Rose, the chief of psychiatry, will be up to see you shortly. I have some calls to make, and I think it would be a good idea if we all left and allowed you to rest until he arrives." She nodded. "If you have something you need to do, I don't wish to keep you from it, but I would like Gabe to stay with me." "I don't think that's a good idea." "You've made that clear, but until I have met with Dr. Rose, it is my understanding that I can make my own choices." "I'm only thinking of what's best for you." "I'm not certain you know what's best for me. This needs to stop," said Elizabeth's mother. "James, she's confused. Antagonizing her won't help. We both have calls to make. Perhaps by the time we're done, Dr. Rose will have an answer for us, and we can take Elizabeth home." She took her husband by the elbow, but before leaving with him, she said, "David, you have our numbers. Call if we're needed." David nodded. "Certainly." Gabe took the hand Elizabeth held out and then sat beside her. She sighed. "It seems my parents already know the outcome." "They're making an assumption, sweetheart. That's all." David leaned against the window ledge. "Gabe, is Gerald Rose still the chief of psychiatry here?" "Yes." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then I think if Dr. Quinn wants Elizabeth declared incompetent, calling him in was a mistake. I know Dr. Rose. He's an old friend of my dad's. A resident might be intimidated, but there is no way Gerald Rose will do anything just because a high-handed surgeon from another hospital wants him to." "What do you think, Gabe?" she asked hopefully. "I've never met him, but Dr. Rose has an excellent reputation. I think he will make a fair evaluation." "What if he says I'm not competent?" Gabe leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "Let's not borrow trouble." They didn't have long to wait. The chief of psychiatry arrived not long after Dr. and Mrs. Quinn left. When Dr. Rose walked in the room, Gabe stifled a smile. If anyone could look more like a stereotypical psychiatrist, he wasn't sure how. Dr. Rose was a diminutive older man with graying hair, dark-rimmed glasses, and a neatly trimmed goatee that was also liberally sprinkled with gray. The old doctor smiled broadly. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Rose. David, I certainly didn't expect to see you here." He had a rich Scottish burr. David shook hands with Dr. Rose. "It's very nice to see you. I'm here because Elizabeth is a friend of mine." "Is she? What a small world." He turned toward the bed. "So, if I'm not much mistaken, you are Dr. Elizabeth Quinn." Dr. Rose seemed to emanate warmth, and Elizabeth visibly relaxed. "Yes, I am." "And you are?" he asked Gabe. "I'm Gabriel Soldani. I'm a pediatric hospitalist here." "And since Dr. Quinn isn't a wee lassie, I presume you're a friend as well?" "Yes, we went to medical school together." Dr. Rose shook Gabe's hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Soldani." "Likewise, sir." He turned his attention back to Elizabeth. "Do you mind if I call you by your given name?" Elizabeth smiled. "That's fine." "Splendid. Now, Elizabeth, I understand you're having a wee bit of trouble remembering things. Would you mind telling me a bit about what happened?" "I don't remember what happened. I've been told I was in an accident." "And you remember nothing?" "I remember Gabe. We're old friends." "And David Sinclair, do you remember him?" She gave David a sad smile. "No, He seems very nice, but I don't remember him." Dr. Rose smiled broadly. "He is a fine young man, and the image of his father. David, were you in the city visiting your dad?" "No, I came specifically to see Elizabeth, but I intend to see Dad later today." "Give him my best regards." "Certainly, sir." Dr. Rose turned to Elizabeth. "Now, you said Gabe here is an old friend, and based on the grip you have on his hand, it appears you're very confident of that. Can you tell me why?" "When I saw him, I had memories." "Did you? And did he look as braw as he does now?" She chuckled. "Not quite. In my memories he didn't have the beard, but I like it." Gabe was shocked. She had never mentioned that. "You look surprised, lad. Many a lass finds nicely trimmed facial hair attractive." He smiled, stroking his goatee. Gabe laughed. "That's not what surprised me. This is the first Elizabeth has said that I don't have a beard in her memories. I'd forgotten it, but I didn't grow the beard until I came here for my residency." "So, you knew each other in medical school. When did you see her last?" Guilt swirled in his gut. 6 years ago, on the day we graduated." "I see. What else do you remember about Gabe, lass?" "The images are so fleeting, it's hard to focus on them, but the feeling I have is nearly overpowering. I'm certain he means the world to me, and that I love him." "I see." He glanced around the room. "I expected to find your parents here. They were so very concerned about you." Elizabeth's brows drew together for a moment. "They said they had calls to make." "If you need them, I have their cell phone numbers," offered David. "Nay, it isn't necessary. I just thought they'd be here. They told me you and Elizabeth are dating." "We were, but we aren't any longer," David clarified. "Her parents don't know that yet." "But you came here this morning, I presume, specifically to see her. Why?" "Because I care about her. I believe her parents often railroad her, and she tries to make them happy by giving in. When they called me, I feared they were about to do it again, and I wanted to be here to support Elizabeth in any way I could." "That's very thoughtful of you." The old doctor canted his head. "And you, Gabe, you seem content to have her hand in yours. Why is that?" Gabe sighed. "I love her. I think I have for years. It was my own stupidity that made me break up with her in the first place." "I see." He surveyed both men for a moment. "Well now, Elizabeth, if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask these two rogues to leave us for a bit." "That's fine." She smiled at Gabe and squeezed his hand before letting go. Gabe and David left the room, and Elsie smiled hesitantly at Dr. Rose. He smiled back. "Do you mind if I take a seat?" "No, not at all." He sat in the recliner, making himself comfortable. "Well, lass, I suspect this has been a right harrowing few days for you." Elsie frowned. It's... "I understand, lass. I know all about the pocket watch." "Did Gertrude send you?" "Nay, I haven't seen her in years. When your father described your odd memory loss, I suspected you were a time traveller. But when you described the intense feelings you have for young Dr. Soldani, I was certain. Where are you from, lass? Or should I ask when?" "I'm from the Highlands of Scotland. When I left it was the year of our Lord 1279. "You don't say! Bless your wee soul. I haven't encountered many travellers who came to the future. I have more experience with those who returned from the past. How old were you when you left?" "I was 21. "And did you know you'd be coming forward so far?" "I didn't know anything. I didn't accept the watch. Elizabeth did." "And you're alive? I've never heard of that happening." "Gertrude said several things happened differently. I don't understand it all, but the watch stayed here instead of going with Elizabeth, and our souls changed places before I... "Ah, you hadn't done the thing that would have ended in your death. Now that's very interesting. So, what's going to happen now? In my time, Lady Mackenzie desperately needs Elizabeth's help. I want her to have it, and Elizabeth is willing. Gertrude says we can change back when the problem is resolved. And you have a mission here? I think I might. This feeling I have for Gabe. Well, it's hard to describe, but I think Elizabeth cares very deeply for him. I reckon I can maybe help bring them together. Gertrude has always been a great one for making sure souls find each other, if they're intended to be together. So what now? Well, Dr. Levi believes you're in a fugue state, and that is an excellent explanation for what everyone thinks has happened. So I will concur and suggest that you meet with me once a week. But I'm not ill. I know you're not ill, lass. I'm a Scot myself, and I want to find out more about where you're from and what it was like then. And you might have questions that you'd rather ask someone who knows your situation. Besides, we need to be seen to do something. It'll smooth things nicely when Elizabeth returns. What about Elizabeth's parents? They want me declared incompetent. Those two are a puzzle. I do believe they care for their daughter, but she doesn't seem to be their priority, does she? No. Elsie looked away for a moment. What is it, lass? It's silly, I guess. My parents died when I was very young. My aunt cared for me, but it wasn't like a parent. No, it wasn't. When I learned Elizabeth's parents were rushing to her side, I'd rather hoped to feel a part of a family. And you may still. Don't give up hope. You just never know. Elsie smiled and nodded, unable to completely shake the sadness left by disappointment. Well, you're perfectly competent, and you need to stay here in New York. I suspect that isn't what your da wants to hear, but so be it. We must make way for the course of true love. He winked and chuckled. When Elsie and Dr. Rose had finished chatting, he went to fetch Gabe and David from a nearby lounge. David called her parents. When they arrived, Elizabeth's father was as impatient as ever. Now, with the formalities done, can we take our daughter home? Dr. Quinn, let's not be so hasty. You asked me to determine your daughter's competence to make her own decisions. She has no memories. It seems open and shut to me. Well, it isn't quite as simple as you think. Open and shut may be consistent with a surgeon's practice, but it is rarely the case in psychiatry. As you're aware, the law requires us to respect a patient's wishes until they are unable to adequately make choices for themselves. The evaluation of competence is intertwined with the decision the patient is being asked to make. The more serious the decision, the more carefully we have to make the assessment. Elizabeth has profound retrograde amnesia related to a fugue state, but that alone doesn't mean she isn't competent. She demonstrates the ability to reason, she holds appropriate values, and she understands her condition as well as the choices available to her. Furthermore, in this case, she is not refusing treatment. She's simply refusing to change hospitals. I find her perfectly competent to make that decision. She has no one to care for her here. She has agreed to meet with me regularly so I can monitor her condition as long as she is in New York. If she returns to her home in Cincinnati, I will ensure that she is under the care of a trusted colleague there. It seems she has friends she trusts in both cities who are willing to help as needed. Who will manage her finances? She can't read. She has a massive trust fund that could be wiped out in the blink of an eye. I can understand why that might concern you. Elizabeth, would you be willing to have an attorney and an accountant act on your behalf regarding your financial matters? Someone both you and your parents would be comfortable with. Elsie frowned. I'm not sure how to find people like that, or know if they were skilled. Before her father could jump in, David said, Perhaps you would allow me to suggest some candidates. I'll take you to meet them. Then your parents can review and approve your selections. Elsie looked to Gabe. What do you think? I think it's an excellent idea. David has the skills it takes to help guide you, and both you and your parents seem to trust him. She looked back at her parents. Does that make you more comfortable? Elizabeth's father glowered at her. Your mother and grandfather own one of the largest legal firms in the country, and you think it's a good idea to seek an attorney elsewhere? Elsie was stunned by his derision. Why are you so angry with me? Because you are being obstinate and unreasonable. Elsie wasn't going to give in to tears again. In that instant she steeled herself. She didn't want a single thing from this man. She turned to Gabe. I hate to ask this, but would you help me for a little while, even if I have nothing, just until I get my memory back? Of course I will. Thank you. Turning her attention back to Elizabeth's father, she said, There, you can appoint whomever you choose to manage my affairs. I want nothing to do with any of it. Keep it for when my memory comes back. If this is the way a father treats a daughter— Her voice caught. She swallowed hard. She would not cry. If this is the way a father treats a daughter, I don't need a father in my life. Elizabeth! Exclaimed her mother. Her father turned his glare on Dr. Rose. Do you still think my daughter is competent to make decisions for herself? Absolutely. I'm inclined to agree with her. You've not shown Elizabeth a modicum of affection in my presence. When we spoke on the phone last night, 'twas clear you were concerned about her, but the disruption to your schedule was as much a concern. He gave Elsie a warm smile. You needn't worry about having nothing, lass. I'll help you sort out things with your employer. I'm absolutely certain you have disability insurance that should provide a little income for you until things resolve. Thank you, Dr. Rose. I've had enough of this foolishness, declared Dr. Quinn. Elizabeth's mother put a hand on his shoulder. James, you're not helping things. Elizabeth, there is no need to take such drastic measures. I need to rearrange a few things, but within a week I could be set up to work for a limited time from the Manhattan office. I'll appoint someone to help you with your affairs. You don't need to rely on strangers. I know you mean well, but anyone you appoint will be a stranger to me. You both are strangers to me, and for some reason I have the distinct impression it's been this way for a while. It seems you've raised me to be independent. Charlotte Quinn inclined her head. We have, but that is an admirable quality. I'm glad you think so, and I'm sorry you're both so upset with me. With that said, I'm not going to Baltimore. Since independence is such an admirable quality, I intend to remain independent. If you wish to stay here, I'd like that, but it's up to you. Please don't feel as if you must rearrange anything on my behalf. I'll be fine. Her father stormed out of the room without a word. Her mother sighed. I'll return in a few days, and we'll sort things out. She kissed Elsie's cheek and left the room. Dr. Rose released a frustrated sigh. They are a disappointment. His face brightened. But you seem to have two very good friends, and, of course, me. Thank you, all of you. Now I'm going to contact your neurologist. He wants you to have another scan of your head, called magnetic resonance imaging. Gabe will explain it to you. I think that's a very good idea, just to make sure you don't have a brain injury from the accident that was missed. I also understand an orthopedic doctor will put a cast on that arm today. When they ask you what colour you want, be adventurous. After that's all done, I see no reason to keep you here in the hospital. As we discussed, I'll see you once a week. I generally take Wednesday afternoons off, but I'm going to make an exception. I'll meet with you at 2 each week. Call my office with your schedule, young man, he said to Gabe. If you're working, we'll make other arrangements, or I'll come to her. Elsie smiled at him, tears welling in her eyes. Don't worry about a thing, lass. You'll be grand. Chapter 9. Gabe smiled when Elizabeth picked bright blue as her cast colour. He wasn't surprised that she didn't like the MRI. The technicians let him talk to her through the intercom during the scan. When all of this was completed and they were back in her hospital room, Martin Levi came to see her. "Well, Elizabeth, your MRI is perfectly normal, so in the absence of a brain injury, I think the diagnosis of fugue is accurate. I have spoken to Dr. Rose and understand you'll be seeing him every Wednesday as long as you're in the city, so I'm going to discharge you to his care." "What does that mean?" "It means you can leave the hospital. Do you have a place to stay?" "She'll be staying with me," Gabe answered. A happy smile spread across Elizabeth's face. Martin nodded. "Then everything is set. I'll go write discharge orders and you can get ready to go." He left the room and Elizabeth frowned. "What do I need to do to get ready?" "You need to get dressed." "But I am dressed, and these are the only clothes I have." "The clothes you're wearing are pajamas, and not normally worn outside, but I suppose they'll be good enough to get you home. You can wear my coat. I'll check the bags that were brought down from the ICU. There might be something usable from the clothes you were wearing when you were brought in. At least your shoes should be okay." He found her purse, computer bag, and 2 white patient belonging bags containing the remnants of her clothing. The only usable items were socks and ankle boots. "Yep, socks and shoes are about all that's salvageable. The rest of it can be thrown away." "Actually, that is what I've been taking care of this afternoon," said David as he walked into the room with a shopping bag in one hand and a woman's coat in the other. "I assumed you had a suitcase in the cab, so I tracked that down. It was found when the cab was towed, and it was turned into the lost and found at the 115th Precinct in Queens. I've sent someone to get it, and we'll see that it gets delivered to Gabe's apartment tomorrow. I also stopped in to see my father. He sent his executive assistant to Saks to get you a few things to wear until you have your own things back." David put the bag on her bed. "Saks?" asked Gabe, incredulous. "Should I have sent her to Barney's?" David sounded concerned. Barney's? Was he out of his mind? "No, I would have thought something a little more affordable. Money isn't really an issue with me." "Come on, money is an issue with everyone." David gave him a puzzled smile. "Gabe, do you know who I am?" "All I know is that your dad is acquainted with Elizabeth's mother. I figured he was a lawyer." "Well, he isn't. My dad is Aldous Sinclair, owner and chief executive officer of Sinclair Amalgamated, and he's Matheson and Matheson's biggest client." "Excuse me? Huge multinational conglomerate with ties to everything Sinclair Amalgamated?" "That would be the one." "What does all of that mean?" asked Elizabeth. "It means you and your friends are way out of my league." David waved a hand. "It's not important, Elizabeth. I'll step out of the room so you can get changed." Elizabeth had begun pulling items from the bag. Gabe nodded. "I can leave too, unless you need some help." She held up a very pretty pink bra and panty set. "I think I do. I don't know what these are." "Those are, undergarments. I can ask a nursing assistant to help you if you prefer." Elizabeth blushed. "Didn't you say we've, made love?" "Yes, we have." "Then I don't guess there is any reason to be shy." He chuckled. "No, I don't guess there is." Aldous Sinclair's assistant had excellent taste. In addition to the undergarments, there was a pair of dark wash jeans, a loose-fitting feminine blouse, and a slightly oversized peach cashmere cardigan that fit easily over the cast. "What is it with you people and cashmere?" he teased. "I have no idea, unless it has something to do with how incredibly soft it is," she teased back, her eyes twinkling. Helping her dress had been a bad idea. The attraction he felt was so strong that putting clothes on her was the absolute last thing he wanted to do. Through sheer force of will, he did. Once she was dressed, David returned, followed by a nurse with a wheelchair. "I can walk," said Elizabeth, frowning at the chair. "I know you can, Dr. Quinn, but even though you're going home, you are recovering from a serious accident and have broken ribs. You must take things easy, including allowing me to push you to the front door." Elizabeth sighed, but sat in the chair with her purse, laptop bag, and the new coat David had brought her on her lap. They made one stop by the doctor's lounge so Gabe could get his coat. As they neared the front of the hospital, the nurse asked, "Dr. Soldani, do you have a car?" "No, we'll need a cab." "Actually, my driver should be waiting for us." "Driver? Sinclair Amalgamated, remember?" This all made Gabe a little uncomfortable, but he wouldn't refuse David's assistance today. With her broken ribs, a drive in a high-end luxury car would be much more comfortable for Elizabeth than a cab. However, when they rolled Elizabeth outside, her eyes went wide. I don't think... Gabe, I don't want to get in that." "Elizabeth, we talked about this. You saw the cars and buses from your window. It'll be okay." "But you said you usually walk to work. Can't we just walk?" "No, sweetheart, we can't. It wouldn't be good for you." David nodded. "Elizabeth, there's nothing to be afraid of. This is a very safe car with a skilled professional driver. And Gabe is right, you cannot walk to his apartment." The nurse narrowed her eyes. "Honestly, girl, you were brave enough to have that MRI today. I couldn't have done that, but I'd have no trouble at all riding in that fine vehicle." Elizabeth still looked wary, but she nodded. "That's my girl," said Gabe as he helped her into the back seat. David climbed into the front seat as Gabe went round to get in from the other side. "This is Jake," said David, motioning to the driver. "Good afternoon, Dr. Quinn. Dr. Soldani. I'll have you home in just a few minutes." Gabe glanced out the window. "The roads are remarkably clear, considering how much snow we got." "Crews worked all night, sir. They didn't even have to close schools today." They reached Gabe's building in a few minutes. He hopped out and ran round to help Elizabeth from the car. David gathered her few belongings. "I'll help you get inside." Gabe's building was one of the few in the area that had an elevator, for which he was very thankful today. When they reached his apartment, he invited David in. "Thank you. I won't stay. I'm flying back to Cincinnati tonight." Gabe shook his hand. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've done. Thank you for everything." "You're welcome." He turned to Elizabeth and took her hands in his. "It's hard to believe that just 2 days ago you were mine." She smiled sadly. "But I suppose you never really were mine, and now I know why. I wanted joy to enter your life, and I think you have every chance of that happening now." He kissed her cheek. "Nevertheless, I will miss you." "Thank you for coming to help me. I don't know what I would have done without both of you. We will see you again, won't we?" "I expect so. I know you told your father you wanted nothing from him, and that's fine in the short term. I'm sure you'll get your memory back soon, so it isn't likely to ever be an issue. But if it becomes one, I can help you. Also, depending on what happens, you may want help with your things in Cincinnati. You simply need to ask. Gabe has my card." Elsie tried to be brave and take everything in stride, but this 21st century world just seemed to get bigger and louder and faster. Buildings grew too tall. She'd been aware of that, based on what she could see from the hospital windows, but being on the ground and looking up was an entirely different perspective. And although the sun had set, there were so many lights that everything was visible, except the stars. When the sleek black car pulled up to the doors, a memory flashed through her mind of a terrible screeching sound and instantaneous pain. She knew instinctively it was Elizabeth's memory of the accident. Elsie really wasn't ready to ride in a car yet, but both David and Gabe insisted, so she complied. There were so many vehicles on the street that it was no wonder they crashed into each other sometimes. Apparently they weren't going terribly fast, but she had never travelled at such a pace. In fact, she was accustomed to walking nearly everywhere she went. Once they reached Gabe's building, she had to ride in another elevator. She didn't like elevators because they made her stomach feel odd, but she guessed she would have to get used to it. Climbing stairs to the heights of these buildings would take forever and be exhausting. She stood just inside Gabe's apartment, and for the first time since waking yesterday, she felt comfortable. They came in through a small entryway with a closet to one side, in which Gabe hung both their coats. The entryway opened into the main room, and there was a window in the opposite wall. A table and chairs were arranged just to the right of the entry, and other furniture, the likes of which she had never seen, stood just beyond, closer to the window. "It's very small, just one bedroom, but the location is ideal and it's all I can afford in this area." The room was somewhat bigger than the main room of Aunt Delina's cottage, and she nearly said so. Thankfully, she stopped herself in time. "It's lovely." "Follow me. I'll show you the rest and help you put your things away." "I thought you said it just had one room." "I said one bedroom, and it's this way." Carrying her bags, he stepped into a small corridor and motioned to an opening on the left. "The kitchen's in there." He indicated another door on his left and said, "I have a washer and dryer in there. I was crazy lucky to get an apartment with those." She wondered what a washer and dryer washed and dried. She reckoned she'd find out soon enough. He motioned to a door at the end of the passage. "The bathroom is in there." Then he opened a door to the right. "And this is the bedroom. I'll make some room for your things in the closet before your bag is delivered tomorrow. You can have the bed in here. I'll sleep on the couch." "The couch?" "Yeah, the couch. The long piece of furniture for sitting on in the living room." Ah, she'd assumed that was his bed when she thought there was only one room. "Gabe, I know you didn't plan on any of this, and I probably caught you off guard when I asked if you would help me. I don't want to take your bed." "Stop it, Elizabeth. I love you, and I want to help you. I want you in my life. You will not sleep on the couch. You have a broken arm and broken ribs." Elsie frowned. She really didn't like the idea of being alone, even if he was just in the next room, but she wouldn't argue now. Gabe put the bag containing the pajamas on the bed. "You should probably change back into these. I'll heat us up something for dinner while you do. Do you need any help?" "I think I can manage." He opened 2 drawers in a chest and combined the contents into one. "You can put the clothes you're wearing in here, then come out to the kitchen." She nodded, and he left the room, closing the door behind him. She didn't like being alone. She tried to undress. The sweater was simple, it was loose-fitting. The blouse came off easily enough as well. But the thing Gabe had called a bra closed in the back. Between her broken arm and the pain in her ribs, she couldn't maneuver out of it. She managed to unfasten the jeans, but she couldn't get them off over the boots she was wearing. She tried to take the boots off, but unlacing them and working her feet out of them with one hand proved to be difficult. During the process, she lost her balance and fell. She found herself sitting on the floor in a bra and panties, jeans around her ankles, boots stubbornly tied, and ribs throbbing. She couldn't suppress her tears. Gabe was through the door within moments. "Oh God, Elizabeth, what happened? Are you all right?" He knelt beside her, putting an arm round her shoulder. I just lost my balance." She swiped at her tears. "And I can't get the boots off, or this bra thing." He kissed her temple. "Please don't cry. Let me help you." He undid the boot laces and pulled off her shoes before removing the jeans from her ankles. "Let's get you up." He lifted her gently from the floor and sat her on the bed. Moments later, her bra was off, and he helped her into the soft pajamas. "Come have some soup, and then you need to rest." He led her to the table and pulled out a chair. A strange beeping sound came from the kitchen. He smiled. "The soup's ready. Sit tight for a sec." When he came back, he had 2 steaming bowls of soup. "This is my mom's minestrone. I always come back from their house with containers of leftovers, and while she will resort to dried pasta in a pinch, she says there is no excuse for canned soup." Elsie didn't understand a word he had said. "Let me get spoons. I'll be right back." He made several trips to bring spoons, bread, butter, and glasses filled with cold water. "I'd crack open a bottle of wine, but alcohol doesn't mix well with your pain medicine." "This is fine." "Dig in." He ate a big spoonful of soup. Elsie looked at the soup for a moment. The broth was red. "What did you call this?" "Minestrone." "Why is it red?" "It has tomatoes in it." "What's a tomato?" "It's a red vegetable, or I guess technically a fruit. Do you recognize anything in the soup?" "Beans and carrots, and this looks a little like the noodles I ate yesterday." "That's right. Go ahead and try it." She cautiously lifted a spoon to her mouth. The broth was tangy, flavorful, and unlike anything she had ever tasted. She smiled. "It is very good. I think I like tomatoes." He laughed. "You certainly used to. Wait until the summer, when we can get fresh New Jersey tomatoes. They're the best." She wouldn't be here in the summer. She wouldn't be here for more than a few weeks. After all the pain, frustration, and overwhelming sensations she had experienced in the 21st century, that thought should have made her happy, but a pang of anticipated loss twisted in her gut instead. When they finished eating, she helped him carry the dishes into the kitchen. There was a sink in the kitchen like the one in the hospital bathroom, only bigger. As he washed the dishes, she glanced around. There were machines that she didn't recognize. One very large one, the size of a small wardrobe, hummed quietly. As she looked around, she realized there was no fire and no source of heat of any kind that she recognized, and for that matter, there was no pot of hot soup. Where did the soup come from? "I told you my mother made it. Every time I visit, she sends me back to New York with homemade food." "But how? I don't understand. There isn't a pot anywhere." She wanted to say there was no fire either, but in her short time here she had seen so many amazing things that she figured something must have replaced fire for cooking. Gabe smiled. "You don't remember what a microwave is." He opened a door and a light came on inside. "This is a microwave. It heats food really fast." He closed the door and opened one of the doors in the big humming machine. Again a light came on, revealing a variety of small containers. He handed her one. "It's frozen." Elsie tried to cover her amazement, but it wasn't easy. "Yep, this is a freezer. Mom puts soup and stuff in these plastic containers, and I freeze them so they'll keep until I'm ready to use them. Then I just pull one out and heat it up." She handed the container back to him. He looked at the writing on the lid. "Wedding soup. You'll love this. We'll have it for lunch tomorrow." He pulled out another container like the first one, shut the door, and opened the other door. Another light came on. This section was bigger than the first one, and it also held a number of containers. He put the frozen soup on one of the shelves. "This side is a refrigerator. It keeps things cold but not frozen. Milk, butter, cheese, meat, eggs, fresh fruits and vegetables, really anything that'll spoil if it gets too warm. All of those kinds of things are kept in here." He opened the drawer in the bottom and pulled out 2 orange balls, slid the drawer back in and closed the door of the refrigerator. She watched him dig his thumb into one of the balls and peel away the thick outer layer, releasing the most wonderful aroma. He handed her the whitish ball that remained, while he peeled the other one. He put the peelings in a container under the sink. "I keep the garbage bin here." Then he dug his thumbs into the center of the peeled ball and pulled it apart. It seemed to be made up of multiple little segments. At her confused look, he popped a segment in his mouth and said, "It's an orange. Try it." She did exactly what he had done, and the moment she bit into it, her mouth was filled with the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. This must be the source of the juice she had drunk in the hospital, but the fruit itself was infinitely better. Gabe grinned. "You like it?" "I don't think I've ever tasted anything so delicious." "Really?" A slow grin spread across his face, and he leaned forward and kissed her softly. He caught her lower lip between his teeth and sucked it gently into his mouth. A pleasant fluttering started in her stomach, making her forget about the orange entirely. When he pulled away, she was breathless. Yes, entirely delicious, but I'm not sure whether it's you or the orange." Gabe adored this woman. How could he have walked out of her life 5.5 years ago? He kissed her again. "As delicious as you are, I must stop kissing you and let you finish eating your orange." She blushed but didn't look away. "I like your kisses." "Then I promise to give you many more. But not tonight. You need rest." She didn't respond, but she frowned slightly. When they were through with the oranges, he guided her into the bedroom and folded the covers back. Let's get you tucked in." Elizabeth's brow furrowed. "I don't want to sleep here." "Sweetheart, you cannot sleep on the couch." I don't want to sleep on the couch. I don't want to sleep anywhere by myself. Everything is so strange, and I'm—" Her voice broke, and she looked away. "What is it?" She turned her gaze back to him. "I'm afraid to be alone." "I'll just be in the other room. You aren't alone." "Last night you held my hand while I slept, and I felt safe." "You are safe." "Please, Gabe, I can't explain it. I'm sure things won't seem so strange after a few days. I just don't want to be alone yet." "But, Elizabeth, you said we've slept together before. Would you sleep with me? I don't mean, well, you know. I just don't want to be by myself. Please, Gabe." He gathered her gently into his arms. "Of course I will." Elsie sighed. She was the slightest bit embarrassed at having asked that, but nevertheless she was extraordinarily relieved. She fell asleep curled up next to Gabe. Chapter 10. As he lay in the dark with Elizabeth in his arms, Gabe tried to process all that had happened over the last 2 days. If last week someone had mentioned Elizabeth to him, he would have said she was an old girlfriend from medical school. He would have remembered her fondly. He might even have said that he had loved her once, but he also would have firmly believed that relationship was in the past. When he walked into her hospital room to find her cowering in fear, something long dormant awakened in him. He was filled with the profound need to keep her safe, to cherish her. The sensation was intense, more intense than anything he remembered feeling for Elizabeth. When Martin had asked if she remembered him, she had said, I think I do. I don't remember his name, but I think I love him." Gabe had been instantly overcome with the sense that he absolutely loved her. Thinking about it rationally now, he couldn't understand why. Maybe time has a way of lending clarity to emotion, allowing someone to better understand the true depth of the love they once felt. Perhaps absence did make the heart grow fonder. Since those first moments, his feelings for her had only grown stronger, and yet with her profound amnesia it was almost as if she were a completely different person. If she wasn't the same Elizabeth, how could his feelings for her be stronger? He sighed. He didn't understand what was happening. She snuggled closer to him in her sleep, and he thought his heart would burst. No, there was no explanation for why he felt like this, but he didn't care. She was back in his life, in his arms, and he would do whatever he could to keep her there. That might be a challenge. For whatever reason, her father had taken an instant dislike to Gabe. That situation would require careful handling, regardless of the fact that it was Elizabeth who had said, "If this is the way a father treats a daughter, I don't need a father in my life." Gabe thought it important to try to mend this rift. Or if that proved impossible, at least he didn't want to make things worse. Furthermore, he couldn't deny that her father was right about some things. With no memories and being unable to read, Elizabeth was extremely vulnerable. For her own safety, she would need to learn certain basic skills until her memory returned. Gabe decided he would start teaching her in the morning. He raised the subject right after breakfast. "Elizabeth, I've been thinking about something your father said yesterday." She frowned. "I'm sorry. I don't understand why he was so angry and unkind." "I think I might. I do believe he loves you and wants to keep you safe. I do too, but I think he doesn't trust anyone else to take care of something so important to him. I think one of his major concerns, one of the reasons he wanted you declared incompetent, is that you do not remember how to read, so you don't have the ability to manage your own affairs. I'm certain I'll remember everything soon. And you probably will, but until you do, I think it's a good idea for you to relearn some basic skills. I work a full week, and then I'm off for a week. On the weeks I work, I switch between working days and nights. So every other week you'll be alone from early morning to late evening, or from late evening to early morning for 7 days in a row, from Saturday to Friday. Her brow furrowed. "Completely alone? Here?" "Yes, but I'm off today, and I have the next 3 days off. I can start by teaching you the things you need to know to get by and be safe, like numbers and how to make a phone call and what to do in an emergency. You also might want to learn how the appliances work, so you can make meals for yourself, or even just a cup of coffee." She smiled. "I'm certain I want to learn how to make coffee." "Then I'll teach you. But more important than making coffee is how to use a phone. You can get in touch with nearly anyone, me, Dr. Rose, your parents, simply by pushing a few buttons." He spent the rest of the morning teaching her to recognize numbers from 0 to 9 so that she could dial a phone. It wasn't surprising that she learned them quickly. This was the girl who had graduated from medical school at the tender age of 22. She not only learned the numbers well enough to read them and dial a phone, but she was also able to memorize Gabe's cell phone number and Dr. Rose's number. She also memorized Gabe's address and learned how to call 911 in an emergency. He didn't want to overwhelm her with too much, but when she insisted, he also showed her how to make coffee and use the microwave. Elizabeth approached learning each new skill with an almost childlike awe, becoming elated when she mastered something. Her suitcase was delivered that afternoon, just as David had promised, and Gabe helped her unpack it as they prepared for bed that night. It looked as if Elizabeth had been planning to stay for about 4 days. There was one beautifully tailored, light grey business suit with both a pencil skirt and trousers, a cream-coloured long-sleeved silk blouse, a plum twin set, a pair of navy wool trousers, a white turtleneck sweater, several colourful scarves, 4 sets of undergarments and hosiery, a nightgown, and a pair of black pumps. In Elizabeth's standard, efficient style, everything went with everything else. Nothing was particularly casual, and with the exception of the undergarments and nightgown, nothing was washable. Elizabeth ran her hands over the clothes. "These are pretty." "Yes, they are, and it is exactly what I would have expected you to pack for a business meeting. But other than the jeans that David brought you and the cashmere pajamas from your mother, you have nothing particularly casual to wear." "Casual?" "You know, comfortable everyday clothes. These are professional clothes, clothes you would wear to work or a meeting." "Why wouldn't you wear them every day?" "Well, I suppose you could, but they can't be washed easily, so it makes them a little impractical. We need to get you a few other things. You meet with Dr. Rose tomorrow. After that, we'll buy a few other things that are a little more serviceable." Elizabeth frowned. "How will I buy things?" "I'll take care of what you need tomorrow." "Gabe, I don't want you to do that. Isn't there any way I can take care of things myself?" "You do have some money in your purse and several credit cards. However, we should talk to Dr. Rose about the best course. At this point, I'd feel better just taking care of it. I don't want to give your father anything to complain about." She gave him a sad smile. "I don't think that's a battle we can win. He doesn't seem to be a very nice person." Gabe kissed her temple. "I know the last few days have been difficult, and your father didn't make anything easier, but he is your father. I hope we can smooth things over." She arched an eyebrow as if she sincerely doubted that would be possible, but said nothing. After they put her things away, they went to bed. Gabe once again had the overwhelming sensation that he adored her and wanted her in his arms forever. He was drifting off to sleep, savoring this sweet perfection, when she said, "Gabe, thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For taking me in, for teaching me all the things you did today." She paused for a moment. "For making me feel safe." She was curled up against his chest, and he kissed the top of her head. "I promised I would help you." "I know you did, but this is just... I can't really explain it. I think I would feel totally lost if I didn't have you." He kissed her again, pulling her closer. "I know what it's like to feel out of place. But, sweetheart, try not to worry. While I'm sure this fugue will resolve, I will take care of you as long as you need me to." She nodded, turned her head up toward him, gave him a sweet kiss, and whispered, "Thank you." With Gabe's arms round her, Elsie didn't care where she was or when she was. The sense of belonging was unlike anything she had ever known. Elizabeth is very fortunate indeed. In her heart, Elsie knew she would feel the same, just as safe and comfortable, when she returned to Geordie. This was a lovely thought to drift to sleep on. She woke several times during the night to the city sounds. Gabe had explained what sirens were, so they didn't scare her any more. She slept more soundly than she had in the hospital, and she was able to go back to sleep easily enough. At one point she woke with the need to relieve herself. She rose quietly and slipped into the bathroom. Of all the modern things she had experienced so far, she still liked the bathroom the best, although coffee was a close second. Before returning to bed, she went to the window and peeked out the curtains to see what time it was. Dawn was just beginning to pink the sky. In her own time she would rise to start the day, but Gabe was still asleep and the cozy bed called to her. She climbed under the covers and nestled close to him. She wasn't able to fall back asleep, so her thoughts turned to all that she had learnt the previous day. She could count before and do simple sums, but now she knew the symbols that represented those numbers. She was inordinately proud of this. It hadn't been so difficult. Gabe had taught these to her so that she could use a phone and the microwave oven, which she could do now. However, she wondered if he would teach her more. Of all the things she might learn about in this time, the only thing that she could take with her that might be really valuable was the ability to read. Of course, she supposed she would only learn to read modern English, but it still might be nice to know. When she asked him the next morning, his face split with a warm smile. "I would love to teach you to read. I think it would be a very good thing to learn, even if you do get your memories back soon. I was going to take you shopping for some casual clothes after you see Dr. Rose, but we can go to a bookstore, too. They make all kinds of workbooks to help children learn letters and how to read. We'll pick up some to use as a starting point." Elsie was glad that Dr. Rose had suggested seeing him regularly. He was right. Simply the thought of spending time with someone who knew her circumstances was comforting. When they arrived at his office a few minutes before 2, no one was at the reception desk, but the door to his private office was open and he called to them. "Come right in. As I told you, I usually take Wednesday afternoons off, so my staff is off too." Dr. Rose's office was large and well appointed with comfortable furniture. He came around his desk and shook Gabe's hand first. "Good afternoon, Dr. Soldani." "Good afternoon, sir. Please call me Gabe." "Then please don't call me sir. I'm Gerald." Gabe laughed. "I fear that might be a hard habit to break, but I'll do my best." Dr. Rose turned to Elsie and took both of her hands in his. "Elizabeth, my dear, how are you feeling?" Elsie smiled. "I'm feeling better. My ribs still ache a bit, and I'm getting used to this cast, but all in all, I'm well." "That's good to hear." She doesn't seem to have recovered any more memories, but clearly can form new ones. Yesterday she learned to read numerals so she could use the phone. "And the microwave," she added with a smile. "Well done, lass." "And I learned how to make coffee. I quite like coffee." "I've always preferred tea myself." "Tea?" "Gabe, lad, you must give her a balanced education. I'll make a proper pot of tea for us, and we'll have a cup as we chat." "Shall I leave you then?" asked Gabe. "Not immediately. There are some general things to discuss first. Then Elizabeth and I will chat alone." Elsie found the tea delicious, but she still thought she preferred coffee. Dr. Rose also put out a plate of things he called biscuits, but Gabe called them cookies. She didn't care what they were called, but she liked them. "Did you make these?" Dr. Rose chuckled. "Nay, lass, I bought them. They're called Nutter Butters, and are a particular weakness of mine." "I've never tasted anything like them. They're delicious." Gabe laughed. "You always were a big fan of peanut butter. I'll have to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for you." "Aye, like I said, a balanced education." As it turned out, the general things Dr. Rose wanted to discuss concerned Elizabeth's employer, and Elsie didn't completely understand it all. Elizabeth, as we discussed, I contacted the university hospital on your behalf to tell them about the accident and explain your condition. The head of human resources will be calling in a few minutes. You'll need to give her permission to speak in front of me and Gabriel. She's going to explain your disability insurance.
What does that mean?
You are a doctor employed by the hospital in which you work. In addition to being paid a salary for the work you do, there are other benefits. You have health insurance that pays for medical care, such as that which you received in the hospital here. You also have something called disability insurance. It pays you part of your salary if something happens that prevents you from working. Elsie had only been in this century for a few days, but it hadn't taken long to realize that modern life revolved around money. Everything had a price, and people worked in exchange for money. Without money, they didn't have a roof over their head or food in their bellies. She also knew that Elizabeth had quite a lot of money. It was what her father had gotten so angry about. She looked from Dr. Rose to Gabe.
I said I don't want to use any of her, my money, while I have no memory. I don't want my father to accuse anyone of trying to take my money.
Dr. Rose shook his head. I know you are upset by your father's attitude, and you can leave the bulk of your wealth untouched, but you really do need to have access to some money. We're going to arrange for you to receive your unemployment insurance.
But...
Nay, lass, you need this. Elsie frowned, but said no more. The call with the human resources person didn't take long. Elsie didn't understand much of what was said, but she gathered that she would receive a certain amount of money twice a month, as long as she had no memories. She just wasn't sure she understood how that would happen. When the call was over, she asked,
How will I get the money?
It will go directly into your bank account, just like your salary does. Dr. Rose smiled indulgently at Gabe. Lad, I think it's safe to say Elizabeth only seems to understand very concrete things. He proceeded to explain what a bank account was and how it worked.
But if the benefit money is just going in with all of the rest, won't my father get mad if I use it?
You have several different kinds of bank accounts, and one of them is called a checking account, explained Gabe. I suspect you don't keep large amounts of money there anyway, but if it makes you feel better, I can help you make sure you only use the funds from the disability insurance. I'll even teach you how to do it yourself. Elsie would rather just stay completely away from Elizabeth's money, but if she did that, it would mean Gabe would have to completely support her. That didn't seem fair either. She nodded. Okay. Dr. Rose nodded, obviously satisfied with the plan. Now that all that is sorted, Gabe, I'll ask you to step into the waiting room and give me a few minutes alone with Elizabeth. Certainly. Gabe stood and brushed her temple with a kiss before leaving. That little gesture created a warm glow within her. As the door shut behind Gabe, Dr. Rose cocked his head to one side. You quite like that, young man.
Elizabeth does, and it feels pretty wonderful.
Perhaps.
I'm certain of it. When she comes back, if she is able to help Lady Mackenzie, she will deserve the happiness.
And you, Elsie?
She blushed and smiled. I think happiness awaits me.
He smiled warmly. Good, because you deserve it too. This has not been easy. I can promise you most travellers find going backward tolerable, but coming forward is frightening and disorienting.
It has been that. I don't want to be alone. I asked Gabe to sleep with me. Even so, when I wake up in the night, it takes me a few moments to get my bearings.
I imagine. Dr. Rose considered her for a moment. You are aware that Gabe can't stay with you all of the time. He has to work.
I know. I keep hoping Gertrude will find me and tell me to say the word before too long. Gabe works 7 days in a row, starting on Saturday.
And what if Gertrude hasn't returned by then?
What would she do? I guess I'll figure out how to be alone. At least it will be during the day. Surely by the time he works at night, everything will have been put to rights.
Perhaps it will be. And perhaps by then you will be more comfortable here. Elsie nodded, but she wasn't sure she would ever be very comfortable. Elsie, there is something else I want to discuss with you.
Elizabeth's mother has already contacted me. She knows I cannot break patient confidentiality, but she wanted me to give you a message. She's making arrangements to work from her company's Manhattan office. She will be here by Monday at the latest. She would like to see you.
I'm sorry, Dr. Rose, but I don't want to see them. Elizabeth will be back soon, and then everything will be resolved.
Dr. Rose steepled his fingers under his chin. This whole pocket watch thing is not always easy to understand. You believe that Gertrude does what she does for very specific reasons, don't you?
Yes, I think so. Elizabeth is where she needs to be to help Lady Mackenzie.
She is. Still, that could have happened without you coming here. The exchange could have taken place as it usually does, with you losing your life.
But the accident changed things.
So Gertrude said. But maybe the accident wasn't really so much of an accident. Maybe everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. Maybe Gertrude had a plan for you that is bigger than just bringing Elizabeth and Gabe together.
What do you mean?
I think it is fairly obvious that Elizabeth and her parents don't have a very close relationship. And didn't you say you'd rather hoped to feel a part of a family?
I did, but...
Elsie, perhaps that's part of your role here. Maybe you're intended to bring Elsie and her parents together again.
How can I do that? I don't know them, and they don't seem happy with me right now.
I think you may be able to do it precisely because you don't know them.
I don't understand.
Well, based on the way her parents, or her father at least, acted, they expected Elizabeth to simply fall in line. I suspect she avoids them because of this. She would never have challenged them, but you did.
That doesn't seem to be the best way to improve their relationship. It seems to have sent them away angry.
I think they were more stunned than angry.
I'm pretty sure her father was angry.
Dr. Rose chuckled. He was frustrated.
At Elsie's look of doubt, he added,
And perhaps a little angry too, but I suspect it was more at the whole situation than anything else. His irritation will cool, and when it does, he may begin to see Elizabeth as an adult with a will of her own. That might be a very good thing. If you approach it with a loving heart, you may be able to help them grow to respect her independence. This little episode may also wake them up to the fact that they had lost their daughter.
She isn't lost to them. She's coming back.
Elsie, I've spoken to Elizabeth's parents on several occasions now. From everything I've learnt, they lost Elizabeth a long time ago. You've allowed them to find her in a way that she never could have. For all intents and purposes, you're an innocent. Elizabeth's past, both good and bad, has ceased to exist. I don't think they realized how distant their daughter had become. Now they have to deal with the reality that in order to have her in their lives, they have to rebuild a relationship from the ground up.
But maybe they'll just wait until she's back and she remembers them.
That clearly isn't the case, because her mother wants to see you, and they have no assurances that the old Elizabeth will come back.
Elsie looked away for a moment. I've already told you how afraid I am, but there's more to it than encountering things that are foreign to me.
What's bothering you?
The fact is that I am living one big lie. I've not lost my memories. They're all absolutely intact. I'm pretending to be Elizabeth with amnesia, while trying to make sure that my own memories don't inadvertently reveal that I am not Elizabeth. For whatever reason, I feel safe with Gabe. Maybe it's because his memories of Elizabeth aren't terribly recent, and maybe it's just because I trust him. Regardless of the reason, I am at ease with him. But Elizabeth's parents make me uncomfortable. If I slip in front of them, they might use it against me. They might be convinced that I've lost my mind.
I suppose I understand that. But I think it would be a mistake to shut her parents out. What if I'm with you, at least the first time?
I guess that would work.
Then perhaps on Monday, when Gabe is working, I'll clear my schedule and we can meet her for lunch. I'll come to Gabe's apartment to fetch you.
Gabe is worried about Elizabeth's parents, too. I suppose it's for the best.
I think so. I'll make the arrangements and call Gabe with the details.
In the rest of their time together, Dr. Rose asked her questions about her home. Elsie found it very calming. He also explained how canonical hours translated into the numbered hours Gabe had explained to her. Afterward, Gabe took her to a clothing store. She had only ever worn clothes that someone had made for her or she had made herself, and except for the fabric color, all of her garments were alike. The sheer variety of clothing available was mind-boggling, but Elsie couldn't deny that she enjoyed shopping. Trying things on was fun, and she had never seen looking-glasses, mirrors, as large as those in the changing rooms. Gabe helped her pick 2 more pairs of jeans and tops to go with them, and one of the girls working in the shop helped her pick some more undergarments. As they were going to check out, a rack of beautiful skirts caught her eye. They were a lot longer than the one in Elizabeth's bag, while still being shorter than what she was accustomed to wearing. She fingered the soft, lightweight fabric reverently. "Would you like to try one on?" asked Gabe. "They are very pretty." "Then try one on." "But we already have enough." "Elizabeth, try it on." She grinned. She really did want to see what one would look like. She picked one with a dark purple floral print, and along with a white lace-trimmed blouse the shop girl said was perfect for the boho chic look. She went back to the dressing room. When she had the garments on, she stood and stared at herself in the mirror for a moment, before stepping out of the dressing room to show Gabe. She felt beautiful. "You look lovely, Elizabeth, and by the expression on your face, I'd say you like the outfit." "Oh, I do. I don't think I've ever worn anything this pretty." He cocked his head to one side, appearing slightly amused. "Then you must have it," he said simply. "We can put something else back." "No, we can't. I want you to have these things." "Ballet flats would be just the thing to finish off the outfit," said the girl who had been helping her. "What are ballet flats?" "You know, flat black shoes like dancers wear." "Oh, I don't need shoes." The girl laughed. "I've literally never heard a woman say that." Gabe laughed. "At the risk of starting a bad habit, I think she's right. There is a discount shoe store near the bookstore. I suspect we can get a pair there." By the time they were finished shopping, Elizabeth did indeed have a pair of comfortable flat black shoes, and workbooks from which she could learn to read and do sums. Before going back to Gabe's home, they stopped at a restaurant, and Gabe ordered a pizza for them. It was perhaps the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. But then again, everything she tasted seemed like the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. Elizabeth fell asleep almost instantly that evening. Gabe lay beside her, watching her as she slept. Today had been an extraordinary day. She seemed to have so much fun shopping, even though she never really had in the past. The truth was that she'd always been too busy to simply spend the day shopping. But today she had appeared light-hearted and happy. "My sweet girl, it seems losing your memory is what it took to slow you down, to make you stop and smell the flowers. You need more of that in your life." That gave him an idea. He couldn't do it this week, but next Saturday morning he would take her to the flower district.